Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Boomer Breakdown. Today, Oklahoma defeats Kansas State 37-31. Sorry for the typo there. Um, yeah, in a game where Oklahoma, in a lot of ways, well, maybe not in a lot of ways, but I think it's more of the same. I think in terms of inconsistencies throughout the game um, that we witnessed from Oklahoma today. And sorry, I got the right graphic up there now. Um, more of the same in terms of 3 steps forward and 2 steps back. So I think the good news is Oklahoma goes to 5-0 on the season, 2-0 in conference play, sets up a huge game for Red River. So many years Oklahoma's gone into this game with a loss last year, and Oklahoma has the second longest winning streak in the country at 13 games, just behind Alabama, I believe, at either 18 or 19 right now. So I think that those are the good things that you look at if you're an Oklahoma fan. I think other positives, the offensive line was better today. Much better in the run game. I think Oklahoma ran for looks like 32 carries for 132 yards, 4.1 yards per carry. So a lot better. Not as good as you would like it to be. I think if you're Oklahoma, to be able to make the play action pass work and make your downfield passing game work as well as you would like it to, you need to be 150, 175 is probably the sweet spot that Oklahoma would look at. However, having said that, you like where you're at if you're Oklahoma, specifically the limited amount of possessions that you had in the first half. You only had the one interception. You didn't punt the ball at all throughout the entire game. But so I think those are good signs. Rattler was good, much better for the most part. Another interception where just a he's having more and more late throws and just inaccurate throws at times. There was he leads him to the end zone and more towards the middle of the field. That's probably a touchdown. There's another big play that he missed early in the game on the slant route. But there's not a whole lot of things that you can say bad. And those things are just nitpicking. 22 out of 25 for 243 yards, 2 touchdowns, and just that one interception, as I mentioned. Um, so offense played much better, almost 400 yards of total offense, 37 points. That's something that certainly Oklahoma looks forward can look forward to in terms of increased production. I think more than anything, what watching this game, you looked at the offensive line was able to get a little bit more of a push. Um, in the running game, Rattler wasn't running for his life. Loved the game plan by Lincoln Riley getting him out. This is one thing I mentioned earlier in the week that I think that Oklahoma would simplify the offense a little bit. You saw a lot more zone running schemes from Oklahoma today, which made it a little bit simpler. You saw a little bit more sprint outs, more bootlegs, just getting Rattler out of the pocket. I think it's a win-win. He seems to throw much better outside of the pocket when he's on the run. Plus, you kind of get away from the protection issues that you can have up front a little bit. They still got to get a lot better play from their tackle position. Anton Harrison went out of the game early in the first half, just was ineffective. Wanya Morris, really wasn't much better. Anton Harrison came back. So again, I think Tyrese Robinson wasn't very good at all. I think interior they played well. I think, but your tackles did not play well. Um, for the totality of the game. So, and then moving on to the defense, I thought was outside of the Tulane game, I thought this was the poorest tackling game Oklahoma has had this year. Skylar Thompson threw for over 300 yards. Didn't do too bad in the running game. Deuce Vaughn 15 carries for 51 yards overall, just 100 yards given up on the ground. However, like I said, Skylar Thompson, 29 out of 41, 320 yards, 3 touchdowns, and no interceptions. So the back end was not strong as you need them to be. So a lot of poor tackling, a lot of bad coverage, specifically by Jaden Davis. He struggled in the pass game, pretty much all day long. Had an easy interception, maybe not an easy interception, but he had an interception that he should have made. Key Lawrence had an interception he should have made. They did get the fumble recovery early in the game on that first drive by Kansas State, but this team, I said this in a group chat, this team finds more ways to make games that should be comfortable, competitive. They find more ways to not find ways to finish a game. You're in complete control of this game. 34-17. At one point, then you get it back to 37-24, a little bit more comfortable. Then you give up then you have the just bonehead play by Tyrese Robinson on the field goal. Puts Kansas State in a good position in terms of that kickoff, and then the kickoff return, which I don't know that Malik Knowles was even touched in that game. So, or in that kickoff, I should say. So, again, you see things that they do a little bit better at, and then you see areas of weakness on this team, areas that they've struggled. They can't so far this season. They can't seem to get to a spot, guys, where they are playing complementary football. When the defense plays really well, Nebraska, West Virginia, the offense has struggled, and then when the offense has played really well, for the most part, played winning football. Today against Kansas State and then against Tulane, the defense doesn't come together. Maybe next week Texas would be the perfect opportunity for both the offense and defense to play together and to play complementary football. But um, we'll certainly get into that, because it's officially now Texas week. But just putting a bow on this. You I don't know how confident everybody was coming into this game. I kind of it was I thought it would be a little bit more low scoring than it was. Oklahoma offense played a little bit better than I thought they would, but the defense played not quite as well as I anticipated coming in. So I think before the game, I predicted 27-21 Oklahoma. So I was pretty close. I was right there, just a little bit. I thought a little bit more high scoring than I thought it was going to be. Again, I think, the one thing defensively, again, that was a little bit of a concern. You weren't able to get a lot of pressure on Skylar Thompson, which, it's the first game all year that they've really struggled to get pressure. So you take that with a grain of salt a little bit. You maybe give more credit to the Kansas State offensive line than you do on the Oklahoma defensive line. However, you um, you just don't tackle well in the open field. I know they desperately missed De'Aaron Turner-Yell today. You could just tell the open field tackling wasn't as good. I think Justin Broyles did a good job in his absence, making playing there for him. But just not the same player. But other than that, just a lot of missed tackles in the secondary. I thought obviously I think DJ Graham played well. I don't see, from his perspective, I didn't really see a ball come his way, so that's a good thing. I thought Billy Bowman had some good moments. I thought he had some bad moments early on, just in terms of some missed tackles and the overrunning the plays. Pat Fields played pretty well from a safety spot, but the linebackers were missing. I mean, Asamoah had some plays, but I think by and large, the linebackers weren't in great position all game. So it's an area where you got to get a little bit better. Maybe this helps them a little bit going into Texas. Texas is clearly the best team that Oklahoma is going to have faced thus far in the season. The best running back, probably the best quarterback they'll play, best wide receivers, all around the best team that Oklahoma will face to this point in the season, and Oklahoma's finding ways to win, which is a good thing. Again, one of the things that I'd mentioned on my on our show with Mark this week was really talked about um, really the uncanny similar um, season that Oklahoma has had to Florida State. I believe it was. You guys can check me. I think it was 2014 when they just continued to struggle, but they found ways to win each and every week. Um, on their way to a college football playoff berth. They did not make. They didn't win the national championship, or they got beat pretty soundly by Oregon in that game. But they did. They did find a way to win game after game after game. Now, I don't think you want to rely on that, obviously, if you're Oklahoma, but I think, you know, you don't never apologize for being 5-0. You saw improvement on the offense, so maybe the defense can make some improvement heading into Texas against probably a top. I would say right now, Bijan Robinson's probably 2 or 3 in the Heisman voting based on the way he played, and Matt Corral and Ole Miss lost to Alabama 42-21, I believe. So he's up there. So Oklahoma has an opportunity to be a little bit of a spoiler from that perspective. And the one good thing that you would say is Oklahoma has done pretty well against the run for the most part this season. Again, like I said today, only 100 yards on I think 24, 25 carries. If I'll look here just to see. Sorry, 27 carries for 100 yards, 3.7 yards per carry. So yeah, overall, kind of 3 steps forward, 2 steps back is really the situation. That this team needs to find a way to finish. I think it's just I think it's a cultural problem that this I say organization, this team has had over the last few years. Their ability to um, find ways to make games competitive when they shouldn't be is really astonishing in a lot of ways. Guys, I think the thought process behind them having such small leads and thinking games are over is very bizarre. Looking at the sidelines, I think they once Oklahoma went up 17 points, they thought it was over. The day that they think these teams are going to just fall over after Oklahoma has a decent lead is just it's not going to be that way anymore. If it ever was, it's not going to be that way because these leads aren't safe. They were up 17 in the second half here. I think it was, gosh, I can't remember, 20. I know they were at 17 at one point, 34-17. But still, just having that 17-point lead and kind of them thinking the game is over is bizarre. Um, so everybody that hasn't heard, welcome in. Feel free to join in, comment, share, like, subscribe, all the good stuff. And we'll talk Oklahoma football here for the next 45 minutes or so. We'll take your questions and your comments, and we'll talk through any nuances of the game, anything that you want to talk about. Could be on the national level, could be on the Big 12. It could be this game, looking forward to Texas, college football playoff, just the crazy season that we've seen so far in college football and in the Big 12 as well. We've got looks like Oregon Stanford going into overtime here, 24 all. I'm actually gonna have to turn it to that game. Oklahoma State has the early lead against Baylor 7-0. Looks like yeah. I mean, I think it's a strange season thus far. Not just in the Big 12 or not just for Oklahoma, but nationally, there's been more ranked teams lose than that's happened in almost 80 years. So Alabama, Georgia, to me, look very clearly like the best 2 teams in the country, and I don't think it's necessarily close as well. So yeah, I think there's a sizable gap between Alabama and Georgia, and then the rest of the country right now. I mean, I think Iowa looked pretty impressive, so I think they're up there. I think this Oklahoma team has a ways to go. Not holding anything back. This team, I think, coming into the year, I think a lot of people thought Oklahoma was probably better than Georgia. had an opportunity to be better than Georgia, had an opportunity to be better than Alabama, and quite frankly, it's not even close. It's not even close from a talent perspective. It's not even close from a productivity perspective. I know that's not what you guys, what we want to hear, what we want to talk about, um, here. But it's the fact of the matter is Oklahoma is not quite as good, I think, as we thought they would be coming into this season. For whatever reason, I'm not sure exactly, what's not clicking or what it is, but just the inability for things to click on both sides of the ball at the same time. It's just not happening. Now they can get there. One of the things I think I've told you guys before. I'm a high school basketball coach here in the Tulsa area in Oklahoma. One of the great things that I love about coaching, and one of the great things I love about sports, is watching kids mature, both from a mental perspective and from a physical, spiritual perspective as well. But really, just seeing kids mature and get better and grow, and so that's what's going to happen with this team. We saw the difference from last week to this week on the offensive line. I don't know if the offensive line could have blocked the junior high defensive line last week, but they played well for the most part. So you'd like to see that. Hopefully, they can put the same team or both sides of the ball together at the same time. So welcome your comments about anything that we've talked about whatsoever, and we'll go through those, and we'll keep you guys updated on some scores and stuff like that you're interested in. So. Biggie, thanks for coming in. Offense looked much better. Agree. Definitely agree. I thought, Rattler looked a lot better. Like there was a couple of throws, but you go 22 out of 25, nearly 300 yards, a couple of touchdowns. You don't have a lot to complain about. I feel like just a couple of inaccurate passes, and then he still laid on a few passes. So um, nothing like that. I think Kennedy Brooks seems to have really, to me, um, almost separated himself as who needs to get the bulk of the carries. Now, Eric Gray's great. I think Eric Gray is more of a third down back. I think Eric Gray is more electric and exciting out of the backfield. Getting him in space, I think, is really good. But I think I would, if I was Riley, maybe 70% of the carries go to Kennedy Brooks at this point, unless Gray is just extremely hot and there's a game where Kennedy Brooks isn't as hot. But I think that, and then your receivers played well again today, all across the board. So yeah, much better job. Mr. John, they need to replace Tyrese Robin. I'm surprised that he was a guy that was actually going to go back into the game after that penalty. I know that Eric Swinson was in the game at towards the end of the game for that the final kneel down. But I think it will be interesting going. I thought I would have assumed there would have been different starters for this game. I was a little surprised that that Beatonbow went with the same starting five offensive line. I don't think. I think they'll roll. I think right now, the way they're feeling, they're going to roll with these five guys the rest of the year from a starting perspective. Now, if one person's really, really struggling, then they may get to a point where they have a little bit more of a quick trigger. But I think I think we're at this point where um, that's who they'll go with. Having said that, Mr. John, I think Tyrese is a guy that I would have probably pulled out pretty quickly at some point today. He had four, I believe he had four penalties. I think he had three. Um, I think he had three false starts in that personal foul, either three or four penalties. Um, so yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I would have probably pulled him out. Sooner D. Many holding penalties were called against Kansas State, especially on the kickoff return. No line still inconsistent as well as the secondary is soft. So a lot of things to unpack in that. Yeah, I mean, I think there was one key play where I think it was a fourth down play where Perry Winfrey basically just got tackled. And the referees didn't call anything. So, um, and it wasn't and maybe so on the kickoff return. I was just so disgusted that Oklahoma really didn't even get a hand on him No one, I thought it was a great kick by Burkett, 15, um, with the penalty 15 yards back, and he kicks it all the way to about the 7-yard line. So, and just the ease in which he ran that back for a touchdown was a little disappointing, obviously. So, and yeah, O-line's inconsistent. They were historically bad last week. So I think to get from as bad as they were to maybe average, decent today is what you would look for. And I look for that group to get better and better because a lot of it's about miscommunication type things. It's not as much about talent, but it's more about miscommunication. So and you would think that that would get better as time goes on. Jesse Browning, thanks for the comment. Why can't we play a complete game? It's mind-boggling, Jesse. I don't, and this is why I said this. I believe some of the things that I saw and some of the things that I heard against Tulane is not something that's fixable very quickly. Oklahoma was up by 20 something points in that game, I believe, in the second half, and you've got starters taking off their cleats, just saying, checking themselves out, saying that okay, we're done for the rest of the day. Whether that's a player issue, whether that's a coaching issue, whatever it is, Jesse, I think that's something that doesn't happen overnight. I think that's a culture that's been allowed to happen, through the coaching staff. I don't know if this is something that happened through Bob Stoops' regime as much, but it's certainly a calling card that we're seeing from Lincoln Riley in his 4 years here. I believe that this is his fourth year. At Oklahoma, just the inability to have complete games on both sides of the ball, complementary football, and finishing the game. I think the best you probably would say is I guess Oklahoma State last year. That game 41-13. That was about as complete as a game as they've played in a while. But it's not happening thus far this year. It's not happening. The perfect time, as I mentioned, would be in Red River for that to happen. But and it's always different, right? When you get when you have Red River, it's such a different game. The my opinion, the best rivalry in all of college athletics. It's just anybody that's been down there. It's just different. So many times Oklahoma has went into that game with not a whole lot of weaknesses, and they've been exposed in that game. And then there's been a lot of games where Oklahoma has been a substantial favorite in that game, and they've just not played well. And so I don't think Oklahoma's going to be a substantial favorite. These two teams are even. I would probably at this point, just the way that both teams have played this year, how much Texas has rebounded and played much better since that loss to Arkansas. Um, I would probably say that Oklahoma will be anywhere from a 3 to a 5 point favorite in this game, maybe even up to maybe 6 or 7. But um, I think it's tough to call right now. I think Texas is playing better than Oklahoma on both sides of the ball. So they will have to play a complete game to come out of the Cotton Bowl 6-0. Yeah, I think they'll definitely need Stutzman. I was hopeful that he might play. Didn't hear a whole lot about him earlier in the week, but it would be nice if they could have Stetson and DTY both back, um, uh, both back for Red River. Absolutely. CE keep this team away from the playoffs, and SEC till we figure this out. Playoffs, yes. The SEC's, I mean, the SEC is inevitable, so it's going to happen. I think it might be a year. I think from something that I've heard today um, was that it's likely 2023 till Oklahoma goes to the SEC. So they got a year or so to figure that out. But yeah, the way this team is playing right now, I wouldn't want to see them sneak into the playoffs. I mean, by and large, because of how they probably would get beat pretty soundly by either Alabama or Georgia. Kind of looking at that. Although, it'll be interesting to see how that works out. I mean, you've got Cincinnati that is, with their 2 wins, I think it's going to be hard to keep them out of the playoffs, and there's going to be a lot of sentiment to get them into the playoffs if they continue to play well. So, a lot of season to play yet to even start considering playoffs. But yeah, I think that's something that Oklahoma's not really in a good position for right now, the way they're playing. Let's see. Yeah, Jesse, I think they tend to call those plays those plays when you lift a kid up and kind of throw him down there. So I wasn't surprised. I mean, yeah, it's a little soft, but I wasn't surprised to see it thrown um, as well. Uh, hey, Eric, thanks for coming in. The end of the half, coach mishandled the timeout clock and went sending more than five. They had bad plays yet they couldn't. I think one of the big problems that we saw, Eric, in this game is Oklahoma was fairly decent on first and second down. They weren't able to always get off the field on third down, and absolutely not the fourth down. On a lot of the fourth down plays, I'm trying to get here so I can um, look and see where Oklahoma was in terms of their third and fourth down defensive conversions here. So just bear with me for a second, if you don't mind. So Kansas State was 5 for 5 on fourth down. So Oklahoma has to find a way to get off the field. 7 for 14 on third down. So I mean that's not particularly good either. So yeah, I think Eric, that's the big problem that I had. Just their inability to get off the field on third and fourth down was a big problem in this game, and giving up those 31 points. Uh, let's see here. Let me get to some more of your comments. Yeah, DTY and Stutzman back, both of those back next week would be um, will be critical, I think, to Oklahoma's ability because you know Texas is the best offensive team that they will have faced all year. Absolutely, no doubt about it. To this point, so far for Oklahoma. Yeah, there's no killer instinct, and I think the glaring problem here is, and I've said this a couple of times, is that the leadership is very much lacking on this team. Maybe even on the sidelines from a coaching perspective, but really, having that killer instinct. This is one thing that I harped on so much, CE this off season, and then the fall practice is one of the big intangible things that's going to be a key for this team is their ability to have a killer instinct and put these teams away that they are much better than from a talent perspective. And we've seen it on two different occasions so far this year with Tulane and Kansas State. Kansas State's not a bad team. They're going to be a bowl. I mean, they're obviously going to be a bowl team. But I think the talent disparity is pretty key on both sides of the ball, for Oklahoma. So yeah, they have to have the ability, and it's not going to come this year, guys. It's just not. It's something. It's a cultural thing that's ingrained into your kids, and if it's not something that's going to happen just like that, just a snap of the finger, they're not going to have that killer instinct, or it's not going to be. And so that's part of it. The leadership, specifically on the offensive side of the ball, is lacking. I saw even I didn't really see a whole lot of people getting angry on the defensive side either. So I think, that leadership and killer instinct is key intangibles for Oklahoma. That's not really there today, or hasn't been there all year. Yeah, Ryan, I think that's a big story. It was a big story for me. So far today was Oklahoma's inability. I mentioned 7 for 14 on third down conversions for Kansas State, 5 for 5. So total 12 out of 19 third and fourth down conversions. That needs to be more in the 30% range for Oklahoma to be successful on defense, to be, where that they need to be as well. Um, Sheldon, yeah, Tyrese always gets penalized. I mean, the only thing, and it was borderline dirty play, like they mentioned on the broadcast. But the only silver lining that I'll give on that is at the very least they showed a little emotion. There was a Marquise Hayes. They talked about that on the one of the touchdown runs where, or maybe it was a pass where Tyrese. It was who was this? Oh no, Marquise Hayes when he made the block. A pancake block, and he showed some emotion. Kind of finishing the play. So I think that's something that you like to see, but you have to have it controlled and you have to have it done in the right way, without a doubt, Sheldon. BK, I'm okay with this win. I think there's two ways to think about the win. BK, you have the school of thought that just win, baby, win in advance, and then you have the other school of thought that you have to win, but at some point, if you keep playing mediocre, average football, it's going to eventually come up and bite you, and it hasn't yet. I mean, to this point in the year, but that the teams that Oklahoma is facing are starting to get better. We had mentioned after Nebraska, it would continue to get better, and they found ways to win. Um, they found ways to win these games. Speaking of finding a way to win, it looks like Stanford just upset Oregon 31-24 in overtime. So another top five team goes down. So, but yeah, no, I think and part of it you find a way to win, and part of it you have to get to a point where you're a little bit more impressive, or either that or you step up your game each and every week to a level that it wasn't at the previous week. So I think that's where Oklahoma's finding themselves at right now. Uh, Carvin Jackson, thanks for. I hope I got that right. Carvin or Carvin Jackson. Bottom line, Grinch is going to dial up some pressure against Texas because no, I agree. Pressure. Oklahoma will have to get pressure, and they'll have to contain Bijan Robinson. So it's a tough ask um, for Grinch and company for in 1 week to um, to step up as much as they need to need to be able to step up in one in 1 week, but they really are going to have to because like I said, the Bijan Robinson is the best. I think the best running back in the country, and he's one of the best players in the country. And as you mentioned, Casey Thompson is playing well at the quarterback position. I don't know how well he played. I watched a decent amount of that game, but he wasn't great, but he was good enough. 32-27 was the final. Texas they only threw for 142 yards today. Um, Casey Thompson, 12 out of 22, 142, one touchdown, one interception. So, um, not great numbers, but Bijan Robinson had 216 yards on the ground. So yeah, they're going to have to do some things to mix it up and make sure that they get some pressure in his face and make him make some bad decisions. Rattler turned it on. Yeah, I think he did. I think he really did. There was some um, there was a couple of bad throws and the one bad decision, but other than that, he played pretty flawless. I'll agree with you. Defense is being called way too conservative for me. It's allowing the super long drives. Yeah, and I think that's a fair comment, Ryan. I think the problem was for Oklahoma offensively, they just didn't get enough possessions, at least especially in the first half. Only getting those three possessions really hurt because they were playing well offensively and did the entire game, um, but um, just just aren't able to dial up enough pressure. And I think I'm hopeful that you'll see that a little bit. Maybe, my school of thought has always been, and obviously I'm not a football coach. I said I do coach basketball, but I'm not a football coach at all. So Grinch has forgotten more about defense than I'll ever know. But my school of thought has been, if you're not covering well on the back end, you're not tackling well in the back end, you might as well dial up more pressure. So I would hope that we'll see that a little bit more, some more exotic blitzes, some twists, some games that they'll play up front as well to put some pressure on and then stop that running game as well. Um, I would say that Bray Walker, Robinson, Murray, Hayes, and Swinson should be um, your starting five on the offensive line. Well, you have to have a center, so I think you either have Conjul or Rame. Um, if you're not comfortable with Rame, you got to have Conjul. I thought Rame played better today. I think this was his best game that he's played this year. So I was probably more concerned with the tackles than I was the middle of the interior of the line. So if you want to say Swinson is a guy, yeah, I wouldn't have a problem with Oklahoma throwing Swinson in there. Wouldn't have a problem with, um, the thing about Bray Walker that I've heard is he just has an inability to know what he's doing and learn the plays. I think that's the thing that I've kind of heard, in just in terms of why he's not getting more playing time. Why it's not he's not even getting an opportunity is more so about that his inability and just he's very is very heavy footed. He did he was a great player in high school, but I think he relied on his just brute strength to bully people, and his he's pretty slow. So I think that's one of the reasons why he hasn't played much either. But um, I don't think that we're going to see. We'll see some guys sub in, maybe a little bit more than we have in the past, but I don't. Um, I would be pretty surprised if we see a different starting five from an offensive line perspective, especially in the Texas game. They're going to go with probably who they've went with the entire year. But if somebody starts playing bad, then they'll get some. They're not afraid to sub. Um, Definitely, absolutely, Jesse. Thanks for the comments. Ryan, the culture is an issue. It seems maybe Lincoln talks different behind the scenes, but publicly, I feel like he makes excuses in holding the kids accountable. And I think it's hard to. That's a very good point, Ryan, because it's very hard. I've talked about this with Mark and just some friends of mine internally as well. But it's so hard to judge um, Lincoln because he has more coach speak than any coach in the country. He doesn't. He's not really. He's not really one that really completely says what's on his mind. I think so. I think it's fair to say that the way he talks to his kids and inside closed doors is maybe a little bit different than he talks about them. Um, you know, talks about them, in front of people. And I think Ryan, I think the reason why he's been so, um, I think one of the reasons why he's been so supportive of them in public, specifically the offensive line, is I think there's been some confidence issues there with how they played. So uh, you know, I think that's a concern that any coach would have. I mean, I think there's a balance that you have to strike, um, with a balance that you're going to have to strike with a lot of these players. Do you have a hard mentality with them, or do you do you have to coddle them a little bit? I mean, maybe think it's a little bit of both, but I think whatever it is, I think it seems like in public, he's not watching the same thing that we are. So I think it has to be a little bit of he doesn't want to ruin their confidence. It doesn't want to ruin, their ability to, because if you lose them, um, then you lose them in terms of that confidence. If it's gone, then it's hard to get it back. If you don't go in there, you're not playing well. Maybe you're not as talented as some of the guys that they've had in the past, and then you lose some of that confidence that hurts you as well. The one thing that I would think from Riley today that was very just just bizarre. I mean, and I still I'm kind of racking my brain just a little bit, and I still don't understand. He put in Caleb Williams early in the game. On that goal. And he mishandled the snap, which happens. I get it. But then he puts him in, and they throw like a quick pass out to the Mario Williams, which actually gains like 18 yards. One of the longer pass catch and run passes Oklahoma's had this year. Um, and then he takes him out. It was bizarre. Like I don't really understand why, unless Rattler had some sort of an equipment issue or something like that. Unless you wanted to give defenses something else to look at later in the year for some individual packages. I thought that was very bizarre. They didn't say much about it. I haven't heard much about it, from social media afterwards. But I think it would be interesting to see, what was part of his thinking in doing that. Um, Thompson is a draftable QB 6 year player. Casey is not that good as the Kansas State QB. Um, I would, Leonard, I disagree. I think specifically right now with um, the health that Kyler Thompson had today, I don't, um, I don't think that he is quite as good. The upside of Casey Thompson's a little bit better than Thompson, both Thompson, but Casey is a little bit better than Skyler in my opinion. Um, yeah, I think I agree. I agree with that. Thanks for the super chat, Jesse. I appreciate it. Absolutely, absolutely. Is Cordell going to the portal? I haven't heard anything about Jeremiah Cordell. I've heard Justin Harrington is putting his name into the portal, but I have not heard anything about Jeremiah Cordell. I wouldn't be surprised by the fact that I don't think he even sniffed the field today. He was not. He did not play the times that he's been in the on the field for Oklahoma. He's not played extremely well. He's looked very timid and very tentative, just going up to make some of those plays. So, um, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. Although it's not a good look for Oklahoma if you lose two secondary kids as well. Um, yep, Stanford wins. Mentioned that just a few minutes ago. Another top five team loses today. Um, I'm in the latter train of thought. Mediocre play will catch up with us. It finally caught up with Notre Dame today. I think. Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think eventually, I mean, unless you're one of those teams that is able to increasingly improve each and every week, I think you've got the personally. I mean, things can change. I think the way things are looking right now, I think Texas looks like. And if you want to say Oklahoma's the best, let's just go under that assumption. You want to say Oklahoma's the best team in the Big 12 right now. I think Texas looks like the second best team in the Big 12 at this point right now. It could get to a situation where Iowa State's better. It could be, I thought West Virginia might have been the best team in the Big 12, but then they lose at home to Texas Tech today. So I think um, you've got Texas, you've got Baylor, and you've got Oklahoma State. And Iowa State, obviously, they're still in that conversation, even though they've lost a couple of games. Yeah, we talked about that a lot, Jay. Defensive line, they just, it was the first game all year that they really weren't able to get a ton of pressure um, on they weren't able to get a ton of pressure on the quarterback. I mean, I think Isaiah Thomas got one sack, and they got some pressure from time to time, but I think the offensive line did a good job. So I think right now where my thought is you give a little bit more credit to the offensive line of Kansas State than really just say that Oklahoma played bad defensively, specifically on the defensive line. But I think if it continues to be a trend, I think it's something to look at. But one thing that you one thing you look at is Texas is offensive line, specifically from a pass protection perspective, isn't probably as good as Kansas State's is. So Oklahoma, I mean, that's evident over the last 2 years how much pressure Oklahoma's been able to get. So I think Oklahoma has an opportunity to make some noise in the backfield of Texas next week. Grinch needs to get more 3-and-outs. Yeah, and I think that's been the calling card for the Oklahoma defense over the last couple of years with Grinch here is they really haven't they've really been in a situation where they've been really good on third down, and it's not quite been the same this year for whatever reason. They're just not able to get off the field consistently on third down. They'll need to. They were really good last week against West Virginia, but obviously not quite as good as they need to be today. So that's something that definitely needs to get better. Absolutely. Let's see. Yes, thank you, Jimmy. We definitely we won. That's about all you can say, I think. I agree with Ryan. The culture is bad when the kids are not smoking weed but robbing the weed super stupid. Why would a college football player be comfortable with doing that? I I have no idea. I have no idea. It's bizarre, like especially these kids that are set to make millions of dollars, and they ruin it by making bad decisions. But um, let's beat Texas. Another beat Texas, getting it in early. I like it. I like it. Maybe our line looked better, but our center needs to be better. Yeah, and I think the one thing, and I listen to, and I invite you guys to listen. I listen to Gabe and Teddy a lot talk about this team, and he Gabe holds the center to a very high standard, and he's talked about a lot about this year. That Rame's going to catch he's going to catch some heat. He's going to be a guy that's going to struggle. His strength is probably not where it needs to be, but I think it's sort of a baptism by fire situation where um, he's going to take some licks, but I think he's going to get better. You guys remember Orlando Brown? When I remember his first year, he got abused time and time again at the left tackle position against Tennessee down there. I remember he got abused over and over. Ended up being, one of the better offensive linemen that Oklahoma has had, and just a really dominant player and an NFL player right now. So yeah, I think that he'll take some beatings this year from time to time, and he'll get some good learning experience out of this, and be and be. I think he's going to be a really good player for Oklahoma, but he's not there yet. He has a chance to get there this year, but I think it's more about his maturation and more about exactly what he's going to do for the future of Oklahoma. Yep, it makes me very nervous as well. Ryan and then Bobby just kind of to capitalize on that. Texas beats the Sooners next week. So obviously, there's a lot to dive into this game, and then we'll talk about it on Wednesday. Obviously, with Mark, and just number one, just exciting for this game to happen. It's one of the best. I think the best rivalry in college sports, one of the most unique rivalries in college sports. And if you guys haven't been there, haven't been down there for a game, it's one of the best atmospheres and just experiences that you'll ever have. It's just fantastic. But in terms of the game, right now, I lean towards Texas probably winning this game. If I'm being honest, obviously, excuse me. Obviously, I don't hope that happens, but I think right now, the way both teams are playing, I would give Texas a little bit of an edge, on over Oklahoma. I think when you look at defensively, they're probably a little bit even. I might even give Oklahoma a little bit of an edge in terms of them being a little bit better defensively than than Texas. They gave up 27 points to TCU today. I mean, 351 yards isn't bad. You know, if TCU doesn't have those three turnovers in the game, which give Texas credit, they forced those turnovers, but maybe it's a different story. You've got three turnovers. Max Duggan, I believe he threw at least one interception. If I'm no, these were all fumbles. My apologies. So they did TCU ran for about 170 yards, 4.1 yards per carry. So it's even. I would give Texas a little bit of an edge offensively. Obviously, Bijan Robinson is one of the best players in the country, but when you look at this overall, I'd give Texas a little bit of an advantage offensively, but then give Oklahoma maybe a little bit of an edge defensively. Um, Love Andrew Rain, but he's not strong enough to go into playoffs. Oh, you're absolutely right. One thing that I said, one thing that I said last week, Caravan, is if Oklahoma thinks some of these defensive lines are strong and big, if they play Georgia, and I'm just specifically saying Georgia, me personally watching the games, I think Georgia's the number one team in the country. Alabama's great. I mean, they got off to a 35-0 lead over Ole Miss today. Didn't finish the game as well as I'm sure Nick Saban would want, but with a 42-21. Um, But yeah, I think Georgia's the best team in the country, and they've got two absolute grown men in the middle. And yes, they would push Oklahoma's offensive line around. So that's one of the reasons why, right now the way Oklahoma's playing, wouldn't necessarily, obviously, love to see Oklahoma play in a college football playoff. Um, Game just because of who they might would play, but yeah, no, they're not at the same level as a Georgia or as a Alabama right now, without a doubt. Linebackers look timid. I would agree with that as well. Outside of maybe outside of Asamoah, I would say that the linebackers look a little timid as well. I would absolutely agree with that comment. And it's kind of funny as I was obviously the Alabama Ole Miss game was going on at the same time, but Alabama held Ole Miss to 213 yards passing. I mean that's a really good a really good job. So Alabama's I would give Georgia a slight edge defensively, but then I would give Alabama maybe a slight edge offensively. I may change my tune a little bit if JT Daniels doesn't play. I think he's certainly better than Stetson Bennett, but I think he gives you a little bit more of an opportunity in the downfield passing game to be successful. So I think Georgia's defense is the best in the country. Really, really good. Um, Philip Neal, Oklahoma's ranked number 5, will be favored. So Oklahoma's ranked number 6 right now. So obviously, with Oregon losing, and we've got a couple other teams still playing. I think Penn State is the other, not couple, but Penn State is the other team ahead. I think Cincinnati jumps Oklahoma this week. So if Oklahoma is, let's say Oregon's the only team in the top 5 to lose. I think you probably have Iowa at number 3. You've got Penn State at number 4, and then you've probably got Cincinnati at 5, and maybe even Cincinnati at 4. But at the very least, Cincinnati at 5 and Oklahoma at 6. I still go by what I said, Philip. I think you're probably having Oklahoma as a 4 to 7 point favorite next week, and I could be wrong. The point spread could be a little bit different than what I think, but I would say if Oklahoma's only 10 point favorite at Kansas State, I think it's probably in that neighborhood, 4 to 7. against Texas. Yep, should be a good game. And join us. We will break down this game in detail on Wednesday, and we may even do something on Friday. Pre a pre OU Texas game on Friday afternoon, just to talk through some things. If you guys are interested, um, really talk about what what Oklahoma looks like, and really what break down the game, and really kind of talk about Friday. Let's talk about some of your best Oklahoma Texas moments, some of the best games, and something like that. I'd love to get into that with you guys as well. Um, supposed to play good, but the defense have to play better. Yeah, absolutely. Um, Oklahoma at 6. You sound like RJ Young. So help me. I mean, and I think that's a definite. I'm not the biggest RJ Young fan. So are you saying Oklahoma at 6 is too high? Oklahoma at 6 is too low? I mean, I don't think that it's hard for me to be sold that Oklahoma um, at 6 is too low based on the way they um, played so far this year. Um, so if you're saying that you have um, Oklahoma, I can make an argument. This isn't a right now, based on the play on the field. I wouldn't necessarily say this is a top 15 team. So if that's the angle that you're going at, you have to give me a lot of convincing to tell me that you believe Oklahoma is truly a top 6 team right now. Um, Definitive line, not lines, but yeah, no, I'm with you. I'm completely with you. So here's where I'll talk through where Oklahoma. So Oklahoma has beat Nebraska, a 3-loss team. They had to hold on to win that game. Oklahoma had to hold on to win a game against West Virginia, 16-13, which they lost at home to Texas Tech, a team that Texas just beat by 35 points. So I'm not convinced that Oklahoma's even a top 10 team right now. They'll be a top 10 team based on where they started and where they're at right now. But you tell me this team on the field that you're seeing week in and week out as a top 5 team right now. Um, I just don't buy it. I don't. They can get there. They have the talent to be a top 5 team. They have a talent to be a playoff team. I sincerely believe that. But right now, this team is not even anywhere close to playing like a top 5 team. Now, if you want to say there's no other teams that you would um, rank ahead of them, then I mean I think that's valid. But um, but I think right now you've got look at Iowa on Friday night. Anybody that watched or even saw the score, they completely dismantled a Maryland team that beat West Virginia, that we just talked about what they've done the last 2 weeks. So Iowa for me is a very clear number 3 right now. When you look at Penn State, they went on the road, and it doesn't look as great of a win right now as it did before, but they went on the road and they beat a top 10 Wisconsin team to start the season. Obviously, it doesn't look as good as it did at that point, but then they also beat an Auburn team, and they'll get their opportunities. They'll play. They have Ohio State in a few weeks, and they have Iowa next week. So um, they'll get their opportunity. So I would, if it was me, just kind of looking at these teams, look how impressive Ohio State was today against, against Rutgers, a team that really pushed Michigan. So I think week in and week out, you don't really know a whole lot about what to expect from from all of these teams, but I think, right now you can't with what Oklahoma has done throughout the season, the balance of work, they haven't had an impressive win all year long when you think about it. You've got to throw Western Carolina out the window. You've got a 5-point win against Tulane, who lost again today. By the way, the only game that they've won is an FCS game. So you have that. You have a what was it, a 7-point win against Nebraska. So you've got a total of 12 points in margin of victory there. Then you have a 3-point win over West Virginia that we just talked about. Um, so that's 15. And then you have the six. So you've got 4 wins that you've won by a combined 21 points this season. So that's definitely not dominance. I don't. Um, Oklahoma is currently they can get there, but they're not playing like a top 5 team right now. So I mean, we'll see what Penn State does tonight. If they lose tonight, then hey, maybe you can convince me that Oklahoma's gonna to land in the top 5. Um, I think early on in the season after Tulane, I was like, okay, let's see, let's wait, let's not crucify Oklahoma just yet. Let's look and see, exactly, um, exactly how good they are. Today they lose to, and I'm just going to pull this up so we can have this discussion here because I think it's a good discussion to have. They lose to East Carolina by 23 points. Okay, 52 to 29. So they're 1-4. They've lost to um, they've lost to Ole Miss by 40. They lost to us by 5. UAB beat them by 7 on their own home field. And granted, and let's take this into consideration. UAB is a team that Georgia beat the brakes off of. They were up by 50, 60 points at one point, I believe. And then again, they lose to East Carolina by 23 points today. Then you go even a step further. You want to look at Nebraska. Nebraska's only um, right now they're winning 21 to nothing over Northwestern, but so they might get their second or third win, I should say, their third win of the season today. But again, they got beat. They got beat by Illinois, who's one of the worst teams in the Big Ten. And then we just talked about West Virginia, who has lost 3 games already. They've lost to Oklahoma, they've lost to Maryland, and today they've lost to Texas Tech. So I think you take those. This team is not playing. It's not playing good football comparatively. So don't look like a top 10 team right now. Definitely agree, Ryan. Oklahoma makes every team we play look better than they are. I mean, I think the jury's out on Kansas State. I think Kansas State I thought coming in, this was the best team that Oklahoma has played. Considering the game was on the road, Oklahoma goes on the road for the first time. So um, they so that kind of remains to be seen. Kansas State had they didn't play very well against Oklahoma State, but still, it was in the game. For the most part, it's got a 2-possession game. They beat Nevada. Um, they've played well so far this year, so we'll see what comes after this one. Absolutely. You cannot hold Oklahoma to its past reputation as an explosive offense. They are undefeated until they wake. Until they wake. I don't know what that means. Until they wake to their explosion on offense. I don't think this team is as capable offensively as the teams in the past. I think, you're just my view, and they can absolutely get better. I think the ceiling that this offensive team has is much lower than some of the teams that they've had in the past. Rattler is what he is. He's a good quarter. He's a good solid quarterback. Oklahoma needs him to be great. I don't know if he has a capability of being great. I think he has the ability of being maybe in between good and great. But let's see, can he be great? So far, he's not at the level of Baker, Kyler, or Jalen, any of those 3. He's not at that level, and I don't me personally, I don't think yes, he can get better, but I don't think he can get to that level. I just some people have, um, some people have God-given talent. He has a lot of that, absolutely, he has a lot of that, but he doesn't have a lot of the it factor things that those kids have. All 3 of those kids were, extraordinary leaders, specifically Baker and Jalen. Um, they were excellent leaders. There was no doubt when you went to the sideline who the leader of those teams are. Um, you don't really see that from Spencer. The offensive line has that we've talked about has a lot of a lot of issues. This is probably the maybe the least talented or the least productive offensive line that Oklahoma has had in maybe the last 8 to 10 years. So, I think yes, they have the capability of being a solid offense, but they can't. They're not. I don't know that they're capable of throwing up 40 plus points every single week, especially when you get to playing good defensive. Um, is this a good team playing bad or just a bad team? I think so. That's a really good question. I think I don't think it's I think it's somewhere in between. I don't think they're a bad team. I think at this point in the season, you know what you are, right? I mean, you have 5 games at this point that you've played. Yes, you're 5-0, but you have an idea. You know who you are. You know how talented you are. I don't think it's a bad team. I don't think it's quite as talented as we thought that this team would be, um, coming into this season. Um, on top of that, they're not playing very consistent at the same time. So it kind of makes for and again, I'm not going to say a bad team. It kind of makes for a team that's not quite as good as we thought that they would be. I think that's where I'm at. I think the team, it's very interesting. I think the team has capabilities of going 13-0. I think they are that good that they can do that. They can navigate this schedule and go 13-0. They can also go 9-3, right? You can see losses. You can potentially see losses on the schedule against Texas, against Oklahoma State, against Iowa State, against Baylor. Those are those are games that wouldn't be at all surprised if they lost. Now, I'd be surprised if they lost all 4, but I wouldn't necessarily be surprised if that was the case. So I think it's somewhere in between. Have the opportunity to get much better. According to Riley has the best arm talent he's ever coached. Don't disagree with that at all. I think, and I will absolutely be on board with if what Riley says and what you say there. I think he is, and he has the strongest arm of any quarterback that he's had. And I put that against Kyler. I put that against Jalen. I put that against Baker. However, like I mentioned before, I don't think he has the it factor. He doesn't have the leadership factor. I think there's just some things he reminds me of a better Landry Jones. If I'm being honest, I think he's got tons of talent, but I don't know that he has it up here to be a championship quarterback. That's just my opinion. I could be wrong, and nothing that he did today was wrong, right? There was just nitpicking a couple of things, that a couple of passes and a couple of decisions that he made, but um, like I said, I don't think that he did a ton of things wrong, but I think when you're the quarterback at Oklahoma and you follow those 3 guys that I just mentioned, you have a lot of ground to cover and you have a lot to live up to. So um, so yeah, um, we'll go ahead and end it with that today. as well. Thanks, Tyler, for the confirmation there. That's just what I've seen this far. I mean, he can get there. I mean, I don't, I think based on what was expected out of him to start the season, um, he's not lived up to that, and maybe some of those are unfair comparisons. And if that's the case, then I mean, I think that's fair. But he's said over and over that he embraces the challenges, he embraces the expectations that come with playing quarterback at the University of Oklahoma, and he got firsthand last week. Right or wrong, being booed. So it wasn't just him, just the offensive line and offensive production in general. With that being said, yeah, he has to get better. He knows he knows what these expectations are, and he has to live with them. Um, so I'll end it with that. Thanks everybody for joining. Appreciate your support as always. Great comments, great thoughts, and these are good conversations to have. Join us at 11:30 Central Time on Wednesday, where we will recap this a little bit more, talk about some of these things, and then also kind of obviously get into some of the Texas stuff, and then and I'll look for some time. So join me probably at Friday at some point through the afternoon. We'll talk about some things. I used to go to this game every single year. I don't go as much as I used to, but one of the most exciting games, and just a fun, exhilarating um, time, a game and stuff like that. Um, so, so yeah, let's talk about some of the, maybe some of your best experiences, some of your best memories, best games, just some in this rivalry. So we'll talk about that on Friday. So thanks everybody for joining. Everybody, you guys have a great rest of your weekend. God bless, and Boomer Sooner.